Hello everyone. Today we are going to start talking about energy metabolism, diet, and weight control. I'm going to try to do this in relatively small lectures. So we cover this last portion of the course in a progressive manner here. So when we talk about especially weight control, the first thing that comes to mind is this idea of energy in and energy out. And I think this has been around for, I don't know, for as long as I understand. I started studying physiology or anything related to weight control. So this idea that all that matters is how much energy you put in versus how much energy goes out. In other words, how much you eat versus how much you spend. And usually, obviously, the energy in is what you eat, is food, is diet. And energy out would be physical activity or exercise or something that actually spends energy. So we are going to look into all these different concepts, and I want to really make sure that we understand well what we're dealing with here, because this idea of energy in and energy out, when it comes to energy weight control, has not been very successful in actually people achieving weight loss. And we are going to discuss this, and I hope by the end of this we understand well, and also start thinking of alternative ways of looking at how food and exercise, or physical activity actually relates to controlling body weight. So the classical way of looking at this is this idea of energy in and energy out. And the first thing that people usually present, or what we usually see, is called energy balance equation, where you have two sides of a balance. One side you have energy in, the other one you have energy out, or energy intake versus energy expenditure. And obviously when both are equal, and the concept of energy balance means that if both of them, energy in and energy out, are equal, there is no change in anything. So the system is under equilibrium, if you will, or there is no change in body weight. Well, again, it's an easy concept. I think everybody can understand this idea. If you have two sides of a balance, every time you play with one of it, or one becomes prevalent over the other, so then there is a change in the direction where this energy is going. In other words, if you eat less than you spend, you're going to lose weight. And then if you eat more than what you're spending, in theory, you would be gaining weight, because there is always an idea that this energy would be either in the negative balance, in other words, you are spending more than you're eating, or you are in a positive energy balance condition in which you are eating more than what you're spending. So in the first case, in the negative energy balance, in theory, you would be losing weight, or anyone should be losing weight. And then every time you're in a positive energy balance, you should be gaining weight. Again, this is I would say, very well-known idea, widespread concept, but I think we need to pay attention to a lot of small nuances that regulate energy metabolism in our body, that really explains a lot of the difficulties and the failure that this concept actually has been taken, most people who actually stick to it. And again, I hope I can make you understand the importance of this as we develop this final portion of the course. So the idea of energy in and energy out is based on the first law of thermodynamics. And what it actually says is that energy can be neither created nor destroyed, but only transformed. So the human body is constantly transforming energy by combusting foodstuffs to produce heat. In other words, every time you eat food, that food has to be processed, and there is a process, or there is a combustion taking place at the cellular level. If you look at carbohydrate, for instance, and fat, these are two substrates that can be oxidized, and that's what we mean. That's what is meant by combustion of foodstuffs. You can also do that with protein, but as we are going to learn later on, the metabolism of protein is a lot more costly than carbohydrate and fat. and therefore it's not as common to think that protein is a favorable or is a preferred substrate for energy production in our body. So, but we need also to understand what is a calorie, because the concept of energy in an energetics, or how we establish how much energy is going in or how much energy is going out, is usually by the idea of measuring calories. But calories are actually a unit of energy that you measure after you burn or you combust some kind of food, some kind of nutrient. So when we actually look at food labels, what it says is that a calorie actually refers to what we call, actually the right way of saying this would be kilocalorie or kcal, which means 1,000 calories. And this is one food calorie equals to one kilocalorie, or the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water from 15 to 16 degrees Celsius. So this is the classical definition of what a calorie is. Again, it's the amount of energy that is released when you burn some food, and it's the amount of energy that is released to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water from 15 to 16 degrees, actually 1 degree. And this is measured in what we call bomb calorimeter. Bomb calorimeter is a machine that doesn't matter what you put there. You can put fat, you can put carbohydrate, you can put protein, any kind of food you can put there in a small sample of a particular food. And it's a chamber, and around this chamber has a sealed water compartment that has a temperature that is set at 15 degrees. So what we do with this bomb calorimeter is you actually light up, you set on fire that sample of food that you put in that chamber. And once that food is completely combusted or burned, a certain amount of energy will be released. And as long as you have a certain amount of food that raises the temperature of that compartment around the burner, increase the temperature by 1 degree, actually from 1 degree from 15 to 16 degrees, you say that it produces 1 calorie, or 1 kilocalorie, because you're talking about 1 kilogram of water. So that's the textbook definition of what a calorie is. So now when we talk about food, people usually pay attention to how many calories they're getting. So what this says is, based on the idea that you would take a sample of that particular food and you'd put in a bomb calorimeter and burn it, and now you have a sample, but now if you extrapolate how many calories you get in that sample of food to the total portion of food that people eat, now you have the total number of calories that are released or that are available in that particular food. Now keep in mind that this machine doesn't take into account any of the metabolic pathways or any of the processes that are involved from the time that you actually ingest the food, the metabolism of that food, all the different effects that a food causes in your body. Because it would be very naive to assume that when you eat 100 calories of carbohydrate and 100 calories of fat and 100 calories of protein, everything would be processed the same way in your body. And we know it's not true. But when it comes to measuring calories, using a bomb calorimeter, and this is what is used to set how many calories a certain food provides, is based on this machine that doesn't take into account any of the metabolic pathways or the hormonal responses that you would have once you eat a particular food. So if the food you're eating contains lots of carbohydrates, so you're going to have a spike in blood glucose. That is going to have also an effect in your insulin levels and a whole bunch of other hormones. And that has implications in your adipose tissue, in your muscle, in your brain. Now, if you eat the same number of calories, but strictly of fat, that fat is not going to increase your insulin levels. It's not going to have the same metabolic or hormonal response. And it will also have different implications to your metabolism and the way your body functions. And similarly, if you eat protein, protein has its own way of being processed, has its own metabolic responses once you eat, let's say, 100 calories or kilocalories of steak. So this is not taken into account at all when we measure calories using a bomb calorimeter. And what I want to make sure is that not only we understand what the concept of calories is, but also how it affects the way or our metabolism once you eat different foods containing different macronutrients that actually ultimately give you the calories. So we are going to discuss that in detail, because a lot of what is currently being discussed in the field of weight loss or weight control metabolism is actually shifting the way how we study this, not only looking specifically at calories, but also looking at how those calories actually are processed, how they affect the hormonal responses of our body, and all implications, what kind of implications it has to how much fat you store, how much muscle you gain, or how much fat you lose, and how it affects hunger and how much food you eat over a certain amount of time. So again, that's why I said that that simple idea of calories in and calories out are easy, or is an easy concept to understand, but there is so much more behind this, or there is so many other important aspects of looking at energy that we need to discuss and understand to be able to assess. And even if you're trying to, or if you're prescribing a diet, or if you're trying to lose weight, or if you're guiding someone into this idea of weight loss, you need to also understand what the implications are when you actually play with different macronutrients. Even though you may have equal numbers of calories from different kinds of foods, they don't mean the same to the way your body is going to actually respond to those same number of calories that we actually take in. But people usually ignore that, and they consider that a calorie is a calorie no matter what. And now we know that that's not exactly true. A calorie can differ significantly from where it's coming from. And you see what implications it has in our metabolism. And also there is this idea, is the concept of metabolizable energy. So what do I mean by metabolizable energy? So it's the difference between the gross energy of consumed food and the energy contained in feces and urine. So both can be measured, and not often are measured by bomb calorimetry. What do I mean by this? Let's say you eat a piece of let's say you eat a piece of bread. So if that bread contains, we know that bread is basically carbohydrate, it's rich in carbohydrate, but you can also have some fiber there, and fiber is also a carbohydrate. But the difference is that when you have the starch portion of that carbohydrate, you can metabolize, you can process, you can break it down, you can absorb it. So those are going to give you calories. But you also have fiber. Fiber is not metabolizable. You cannot process that. So in theory, you have a total amount of energy in the food you eat, but you have to find out, you have to be able to understand that not all that energy will be actually available in your body. Why is it? Because probably you're not going to have 100% of all carbohydrates being processed and digested and absorbed. And for sure, you're not going to be able to absorb or metabolize the fiber that is present in that bread. And for that reason, that energy that is present in fiber will not be available in your system. You're not going to be able to absorb it. Now, if you take that same piece of bread and put on a bomb calorimeter, the bomb calorimeter doesn't care if it's fiber or if it's just a carbohydrate as any other, because you're going to be able to burn that fiber the same way that you're going to be able to burn starch. So in other words, the bomb calorimeter will measure the energy that is present in the fiber. So which means that if you eat that piece of bread and you burn it completely, so you know that there is a portion of it, a fraction of it, that is not going to be metabolizable by you. So therefore, we have to deduct or discount that calorie that is is available in that food because you burned in a bomb calorimeter, but you know that it won't be burned or it won't be absorbed and it won't provide energy if it's in your system. So the concept of metabolizable energy is that you deduct that energy that is out of the system. So if you were to measure it in a human being, you would look at in the feces and urine. Why is that? Because if you don't metabolize fiber, whatever is left over from a food that you ate, from that piece of bread that you ate, you need to be able to, you know how much you put in your mouth, but you need to know how much is actually left over once the whole process of digestion takes place. So metabolizable energy means that energy that really stays in your system, that is available to you. So you have to deduct from the total energy content of a particular food that energy that is specifically available, or that remains in the feces once, and also in the urine, because some of it can be lost through the urine, can be eliminated, especially if it's protein. You have some byproducts of protein, like urea, that goes out in your urine, and therefore you also have to account for that. So in this way, you know exactly how much energy you're putting in and how much energy is actually going out or is remaining after your digestion and absorption and all the metabolism takes place. So metabolizable energy, that's the concept that is important also to keep in mind. So we know that the human body cannot extract all the calories liberated from combustion of a food, and that macronutrients differ according to their chemical composition in the number of calories per unit of weight. So what does that mean? So we have a table, and this was established long ago, and it's called the Atwater General Factors. So what are this? Atwater was the person who actually did the studies and looked at this. So, and this is what actually gave us the numbers that we use nowadays to calculate energy present in foods. So here we go. So we have here the macronutrient on the left. So we have protein, fat, and carbohydrate. So when you combust, it's called heat of combustion. So this is how much heat comes out in kilocalories per gram. In other words, when you burn a certain amount, 1 gram of a particular food, it gives out a certain amount of heat. And this is what we call kilocalories per gram. So if you look at just by the pure, on a bomb calorimeter, the pure yielding of heat, you see the protein gives you 5.65 kilocalories per gram, fat 9.4, and carbohydrate 4.1. So this is the total heat of combustion that you get when you put food in a bomb, or any kind of 1 gram of each of these macronutrients in a bomb calorimeter. Now there is a coefficient of availability, which means that how much of that energy is actually available for the body to be able to absorb and use. So that's the parts that we refer to, that metabolizable energy. How much of that your body is really capable of absorbing, and how much of those calories are actually available to you. So based on that, there was created a coefficient of variability that you do in different types of food that contain protein, that contain fat, and contain carbohydrate. So for protein is approximately 92% efficiency or availability, fat is 95%, and carbohydrate is 97%. So now if you calculate this proportion, you're going to see that the total available energy in kilocalories per gram of total nutrients that someone eats is 4. We use a coefficient of 4. It's for 1 gram of protein, we use 4 for the purpose of calculating energy availability for humans. So if it's protein, we multiply by 4. If it's fat, it's 8.9, but we usually round it up to 9 because it's so very close, so to facilitate calculation. But the actual number is 8.9, but we usually refer it to 9. We round it up to 9. And if it's carbohydrate, again, it's 4. And how did they came up? Atwater, actually, the guy who did the studies, how did he come up with these numbers? It was because he did the burning of the absolute heat produced, and he also established what is the availability, or coefficient of availability that you you have to take into account, because this gets rid of that energy that is not metabolized, is not processed. So this is essentially how many calories you get from each of the macronutrients when you burn 1 gram of each of them. Okay, so, and this has been calculated again and well established, and this is actually the numbers that we use for any foods, anything that we actually establish in number of calories. So when you go to the grocery shop and you take a piece of, I'd say you buy milk, there is like the number of calories that you can get from milk. Why is that? Because they use the sample of that milk and they calculate it. They know how much protein, fat, and carbohydrate is in that milk, so they can now multiply by these factors here. And with that, they know the total number of calories you get there. Same thing if you eat a piece of meat. They're going to look at the meat and say, well, how much protein, fat, and carbohydrate is present in this food. So you don't need to put now every time you get a different food, you don't need to burn in a bomb calorimeter, because this has been done in the past. So now we know there is a factor that you multiply depending on how much in grams you have of each of these macronutrients, and then you can establish the number of calories every food gives you. It can be done with bread, can be done with rice, beans, vegetables, fruits, anything. You just need to know, and there are already established tables that already establish how many of this, or the proportion of protein, fat, and carbohydrate that you have in all these foods. For that reason, now you can, with that, you can actually establish the total calories that are available in any particular food. Okay, so for today, we're going to stop here. And we're going to continue discussing this topic, because there are a few more issues, things that we need, some basic concepts that we need to establish to be able to understand, well, what goes on when we are interested, or when we think of weight loss, weight control, and we think of food. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.